Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you need to know about sports. Let's welcome in the co-host of the podcast, Mark. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing pretty well. Things are ramping up in the NFL. NBA's up and going, and baseball's right in the middle of the offseason, so we got a lot to talk about. And I missed talking to you guys last week, but back with a ton of news this week.
Yeah, so a ton has happened. We've got through, 2 weeks in the playoffs in the NFL. The NBA is starting to get to the point where we're starting to know what teams are going to be, and we got some big news with the trade. And then MLB is starting free agency, and there's some big names going places and some big names still kind of to pick a place to go. But let's start with the NFL. We are in the playoffs, and we are down to the final four teams, the AFC Championship and the NFC Championship, and that will start this weekend, this Sunday, January 24th. We got the Tampa Bay Bucs versus the Green Bay Packers at 3 o'clock, and then after them is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills at 6:40. Looking at these two games, are you surprised any by who made it?
Not really. I mean, I think the Saints, you could have said, maybe had a chance last week, but I mean, just seeing these four teams, nothing really surprised me from beginning of the season to now. I mean, Buffalo, I expect to be good. Kansas City, expect to be good. Green Bay, I maybe didn't expect them to be this good, but I didn't think they would miss the playoffs by any means, so I'm not super surprised there. And then the Buccaneers, maybe people expected them to be pretty good, and I was maybe as hyped up about them as a lot of people, but I expect them to be here. So no real surprises for me out of these four teams. Any of these surprise you?
I mean, going back to the beginning of the season, I'd have to say Buffalo, but about halfway through the season, I kind of jumped on the Buffalo bandwagon. I mean, it wasn't like cheering for them, but it was more of this isn't a fluke anymore. And I mean, both of these games I think are going to be shootouts. I think both of these games are going to be close. The Kansas City game could have ended very, very badly because of the injury and all that. The Bills kind of took care of business on their side. There was no real shootout with that game. The Bucs kind of ran away with the Saints on that, and then the same with the Packers. So I guess looking at the three teams I talked about coming into this game, they kind of blew out their opponent. And then the Chiefs should have if they would have had Patrick Mahomes second half, but they were able to hold on. If you're looking at these two games, who do you got between the Tampa Bay Bucs and the Green Bay Packers?
I'd say Green Bay. I mean, Tampa's obviously got weapons and has been better this year than they were in past years, but Green Bay just seems steady. I guess I put it that way. Tampa Bay seemed like they peaked about week 8 to 10, somewhere around there, and that's when they were really playing good. And then the second half of the season seemed like they lost to some teams they shouldn't lose to, and that's the NFL. You kind of have to take care of the teams you're supposed to beat, and I think Green Bay's done a better job of that. And I guess the only thing that gave me pause, kind of looking at both their schedules, is that when they met earlier on in the season, Tampa Bay beat Green Bay pretty bad, 38-10. But I think these are two different teams since then. Green Bay's gone on looks like a 6-game win streak to end the season, and then their win last week puts them at 7. Rodgers is playing good. They beat a decent Los Angeles team last week, and I don't know if I think Tampa Bay's that much better than Los Angeles. Maybe I'm thinking highly about the Rams, but I just think the Packers are playing steady. They're playing well. They got everything going pretty well, and I think I just saw too many ups and downs with the Tampa team this year, and even in the playoffs, I mean, they only beat Washington, who we both agree is probably the worst team in the playoffs this year, by 8. That's not blowing them out by any means. And New Orleans, they beat them by 10, but I mean, Drew Brees has been banged up a lot of the year, and I think we're going to talk about him a little bit later. But I don't know. I see more dominance and kind of taking care of business from Green Bay. What do you see out of these two teams?
Yeah, the only thing I could see is Tampa Bay comes out and plays really, really good defense. They kind of have that good defense, but kind of like what you said, they're just not very steady. There's some teams that they should have easily taken care of, and they skidded by or weren't able to do so. And I feel like the Packers are it's like once your team is so good, you can have a bad game and still win. And I feel like that is a Green Bay team. I don't feel that way with Tampa Bay. I feel like Tampa Bay really has to play good all game to win. And so I give Green Bay the edge, but I do think it'll be a close game, and it'll be interesting to see Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers go at it. The second game is Kansas City versus the Buffalo Bills. I know way on early, like even before the season started, you were on the Buffalo bandwagon. Are you still feeling pretty confident in this team, or do you think the Chiefs will be ready to beat them?
I mean, as a Chiefs fan, I'm biased in this game, and I mean, I don't know how you can take everything I say with a grain of salt because I want the Chiefs to win, but I'm scared as a Chiefs fan this week. I mean, I don't think we talked. I mean, we didn't have the podcast last week, and I don't think we talked much besides that. But we were both scared, I think, last week about the matchup with the Browns, just the firepower they have, and Buffalo's kind of the same thing. I mean, you got Stephon Diggs, but you got some solid 2, 3, 4 guys behind him as far as weapons, and a couple serviceable running backs. So Buffalo's got plenty of weapons. If Josh Allen is playing up to his potential, they could go toe to toe with Kansas City, in my opinion, and they got the defense to match as well. I'd say if you're comparing the two defenses, Buffalo, I think, has the edge, at least in my opinion. But, I mean, it all kind of depends on Mahomes and what he does. I mean, I think if Henny's in the game and we don't see Mahomes, then I think the Bills run away with this. If it's Mahomes and Allen, I think you got a shootout there, and that could be a 40 to 30-some game or something around there. But, I mean, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be close either way. I want the Chiefs to win, so that's who I'm picking, I guess. But I would not be surprised at all if the Bills won. What do you think about this game?
Well, I mean, I'm again with bias with you about the Chiefs, and coming into the game against Cleveland, who'd they play their first round? Cleveland, did they play? They played Steelers, right?
Yeah, it was a division matchup.
And I know we talked about in the podcast that we were talking about it, and I actually thought Cleveland would win that game. And that's just because Cleveland's a really, really good team. And then last week, the defense for Kansas City, I mean, they came hard, and they played really, really well. And Cleveland probably should have ran the ball a little bit more at the beginning, but we kind of closed that down early on. And so they had to kind of go to the air raid type of offense. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a close game, but it ultimately comes down to the Chiefs' defense, whether or not the Chiefs win or Buffalo wins. Because offense is going to be there as long as Patrick Mahomes comes out of concussion protocol, which it sounds like he will. He practiced today, but still has to pass all the stuff. But yeah, I think the Chiefs' defense is going to determine who wins this game. If they can throw out blitzes and do all this weird stuff that Buffalo isn't ready for, then I think the Chiefs win this one. However, if Buffalo's ready, I mean, Buffalo's defense is good. I mean, we could say that. Their defense is definitely good. Their offense is good. They're very, I would say, kind of like the Packers. Like, they're going to get their points. Kansas City's offense, to me, is either they have a crazy good game and they go off for a lot of points, or they kind of just skate by. And so that's what worries me, because if the Chiefs' offense comes and tries to skate by and their defense doesn't show up, then Buffalo's gonna win this one. But I do have to take the Chiefs in this one, and I would go Packers and Chiefs for the Super Bowl. Speaking about the Super Bowl is going to be February 7th, so it'll be this weekend, and then they'll have a bye weekend, I believe, for the Pro Bowl. I don't know where they're doing the Pro Bowl this year and all that stuff, but I know Pro Bowl's in the middle of that, and then we got the Super Bowl coming on February 7th. So if you're one of these 4 fans, you might be marking February 7th on your calendars.
This says the Pro Bowl is canceled this year. Maybe they just kind of avoiding stuff, but looks like it was scheduled for the 31st, but as far as ESPN has, it says canceled on the NFL schedule.
Well, there you go. So that everyone gets an off week on the 31st. And speaking about having off weeks, Phillip Rivers is going to have as many off weeks as he wants now after retiring today When we're doing the podcast, it's January 20th. He retired the day after 17 seasons. So I thought it'd be fun to do a little game. Not really like there's a winner or loser in this game, but we're gonna kind of go over some big names that are still in the NFL and kind of ask, when will they be retiring, or will they be retiring this offseason? So Phillip Rivers is done after 17 years. What would you do with Tom Brady? Do you think he's done this year? Do you think if he's if he wins Super Bowl, he's done? I mean, how many more years do you think Tom Brady's got left?
If I had to put a number on, I'd say 3. I don't think they're reaching the Super Bowl this year. Like we talked about, I'm picking the Packers there. So, and I don't think he wants to go out on a sour note like that unless he's basically forced out. So I'd say he's not retiring, and I'd probably shoot for 3 years so he can try to get a couple more Super Bowls.
Okay, and then what do we think about Drew Brees? I know kind of coming into that NFC game against the Bucs, it was kind of like, well, this is Drew Brees' last hurrah, but do you think he's done after the season, or do you think he's coming back?
I think he might be done. I mean, if you saw the footage of him after the game and running off the field and stuff, he was looking pretty emotional, and just all the injuries he's faced this year, at some point you kind of have to say the game's beat me up and I want to be with my family after all this is done and not be basically crippled in the process. So I think he may be getting to that point where he's going to retire. And just kind of based on seeing that film of him, I think he's emotional about it, but it looks like he's going to be hanging it up here probably this offseason.
Yeah, I just saw on Twitter like literally 20 minutes ago that his wife posted, I don't know if on Twitter or where, but basically that he's been playing with a torn rotator cuff all season. So it's crazy to think that he's got a torn rotator cuff, yet he's still one of the, I would say, top 10 quarterbacks in the league. I mean, every once in a while he had that like top 3 kind of year, but I mean, he's just done it for so long and he's been so consistent that, I mean, that's why he has all these records. But I'm kind of with you. I think he's done after this year. I think it's the time to do it. As a Saints standpoint, kind of knowing how much money they have in salary cap next year, it'd probably be a good time to kind of move on from Drew Brees. And so I think he's done as well. What do you think about Larry Fitzgerald? Do you think he's coming back? I mean, he had those great years, and then it was kind of like he fell off a little bit, and then he came back for another year, and now it's kind of like he's dropping off again. Do you think he's done anytime soon?
No, I mean, I think he's still playing at a decently high level. Like you said, he's maybe not where he was in his prime years, but, I mean, Arizona's got some talent. He's got DeAndre Hopkins around him to maybe take a little bit of the load off, and he's got young quarterback in Kyler Murray. I mean, this year he had, 54 receptions for 409 yards, so maybe not as much as I thought. But, I mean, I think he'd still be a solid maybe third receiver on that team, and even if he kind of slowly fades off into the distance over the next couple of years, I think that's a guy that can be a mentor to not only the receivers, but Kyler Murray and some of the younger guys on that team. So I think he'll stick around for maybe a couple more years. May not get that Super Bowl that he's always been looking for, and that he probably deserved to play in more chances than he got. But I see him sticking around for a little bit. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's he's 37 right now, which is really, really good for a wide receiver to even stick around that long, and to not have. He hasn't had a lot of big injuries in his career, which I think has definitely helped him to being 37. But I don't think he's going to ever return to those prime years. So I think he might stick around a couple more years and hang out, and maybe even possibly go to a different team that kind of needs help or wants a veteran wide receiver to kind of teach the young wide receivers the ropes. But yeah, I don't think he's done this year. I think he's got maybe a few years left. What do you think about Frank the Tank Gore? I don't know how old he is now, but he's too old. But how do you think he's done after this year? Or you think he's going to give it another try?
I don't know, man. He's one of those guys that I won't believe he's retired until I see it. I mean, he just keeps trucking away, and I mean, he's been bouncing around he's on the Jets this year, and he's on the Buffalo for a while, and he's kind of bounces around from team to team. But he's just a workhorse, and I mean, I think he'll stick around. I mean, maybe a couple more years, he'll have to hang it up at some point, but he's one of those guys I'll believe it when I see it. So I think he's gonna at least maybe next year, maybe the year after he'll retire. But he was the leading rusher, it looks like, for the Jets, which isn't saying much. But had 653 yards this year on 187 carries, so it's not like they were taking it easy on him. But I don't think it'll be this year, but maybe next year or the year after he'll be retiring. What do you think?
Yeah, he's a guy that I think plays, and unfortunately, it kind of sucks to say, and I don't want it to be this way, but I have a feeling he'll play until he gets like some sort of injury that he can't come back from, because of his age, and I feel like that's kind of what takes him out. But I mean, he's been in the NFL for so long, and like you said, he's played on so many different teams, and he's helped so many different teams out, that it's kind of like one of those, he might not be a Hall of Famer, but he's one of those guys you'll remember. You'll know the name Frank Gore if you kind of grew up in this era. Another person you'll remember the name of is Rob Gronkoswki, the Gronk coming back this year with Tom Brady. He retired, did he retire for the full year last year? Or did...
Yeah, I think so.
He retired for the full year last year, and then came back this year to kind of reunite with Tom Brady. Do you think he's gone, or do you think he's kind of continues to play until Tom's done?
Has he been beat up at all this year as far as injuries go? I don't think.
I don't think so. And I mean, he's not the Gronk he once was in New England, but he actually caught a few touchdown passes this year, and I think he was maybe top 15, top 20 as far as tight end goes on like fantasy football. So he didn't have a terrible year, but
okay.
I don't know. I mean, he's definitely not the old Gronk where he was like a top 3 tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll probably stick around as long as Brady does. So again, I project about 3 years for Brady. I could see Gronk maybe doing that unless he gets another big injury. Then I think he'll hang it up. But he's one of those guys, if it's a big injury, I think he's done. So I think he'll stick around as long as he can with Brady, but if something catastrophic happens in the next couple of years, you may see him retire early.
Yeah, and speaking of a catastrophic injury but bouncing back, is Adrian Peterson, still in the league, still trucking along, kind of like Frank Gore. He had that knee injury, comes back, has another MVP season, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit. I mean, he's not getting those big numbers as he once was, but he's also not. He's kind of like in the same boat as Frank Gore, I feel like, where he's still trucking along, he's still doing his thing, but he's not having any breakout seasons. What do you think about Adrian Peterson? Think he's done, or you think he comes back?
I think he's one of those guys you'll probably have to force him out, so I think he'll come back, but I think the demand for him and maybe the market for him is not what it was. I mean, Frank Gore, I'm looking at both their stats here. Frank Gore had more yards than him, so if you're thinking about picking up a guy on the borderline of retirement, I'd maybe go with Frank Gore. Adrian Peterson had 156 carries, so I guess he's kind of their workhorse there in Detroit, but only 604 yards. He just seems like a guy that's going to play until somebody tells him he can't, or like that nobody's looking for him. So I think he'll keep holding on, but I don't know if that's the best choice for him and his legacy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I kind of with like what you said with the legacy thing. I feel like Adrian Peterson will probably be a Hall of Famer. I don't think he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think he'll be a Hall of Famer. But I feel like the longer he kind of goes, not that it would tarnish his name, but I feel like I feel like if he would have been done after like a year or two ago, then he would have lived that legacy on. But now it's like people are kind of like like, okay, dude, hang it up. You're good. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. So I don't know if it's helping or hurting his legacy by having him continuing to come back. Another person that I guess has a legacy, but we're not sure which way it's going to go or how it's going to end, and that's Big Ben. He's had a few big injuries in his career. Come back from them. He's played during injuries and stuff, so he wants to play. And the Steelers kind of had their shot this year, and they couldn't come through in the clutch. That's the shot Big Ben wanted, and his players wanted it, and they weren't able to do it. Do you think Big Ben's done, or do you think he's got a few more years left in him?
I put him in the same class as Brady. I guess I could see both of them retiring probably the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, Big Ben had over 3,800 yards this year, 33 touchdowns, didn't have 10 interceptions, which seems like quite a bit for him. But he's got a lot of young weapons, kind of like Brady. I mean, Brady's got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and all those guys in Tampa. Big Ben's got James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster and some younger weapons. So he's got guys to maybe take the load off of him, and solid offensive line there in Pittsburgh. So only things I could see kind of forcing him out would be injuries to, I guess there's three things I see. Injuries to himself, injuries to his major weapons, like if Juju Smith-Schuster, God forbid, tore his ACL or something for a year and was out, and that's kind of a wasted Big Ben year, that might push him into retirement. Or if Cleveland sticks around and is kind of legit here for the next couple of years, he might think, well, I don't have a shot. I'm nearing 40. He's 38 right now. Going to be 39 in March. So if Cleveland's staying power is here and they kind of take over the division, he might think, well, I don't really have a shot. Even with all these weapons, Cleveland can match up with us. So I think either way, I think he's got 2 or 3 years, but injuries to himself or his weapons could force him out maybe earlier than he would like.
Yeah, and I would say Cleveland's going to be here to stay unless and I'm sure they'll find a way to screw it up, honestly. I mean, and especially as a Cleveland fan, you got to kind of be like, okay, well, where's the redlining? Like, when's this going to break? But yeah, Cleveland's looking really strong, and they're looking like they're going to be fielding a really good team for several years to come. All right, let's jump over to the NBA, and kind of the biggest thing that headlines this since we've talked last was a huge trade sending James Harden to the Nets from Houston. If you kind of want to know what's going on with that, if you haven't heard, or if you live under a shell, or you don't have cable or internet or anything, James Harden basically wanting out of Houston, and he kind of got his wish. And the Nets get James Harden from the Rockets and then a second-round pick from the Cavs, because there's multiple teams in this trade. You got the Nets, you got the Rockets, and then you got the Cavaliers also getting in here and getting some of the trade benefits. But the biggest notable thing is James Harden going from the Rockets to the Nets, and then the Rockets and basically get back is Caris LeVert, and then 3 first-round picks in 2022, 2024, and 2026. And then they also get 4 first-round pick swaps with 2021, 2023, 2025, and 2027. And to kind of help you understand what a pick swap is depending on who has the better pick. So in 2021, if the Rockets or the Nets, whoever has the better pick, the Rockets will get that pick, and then the other pick will go to the Nets. So, I mean, the Nets are kind of building this type of 3-guy lineup with Durant and Kyrie Irving, and now Harden. I mean, they're looking to be good. So those Rocket picks for the next probably 4 years are going to be some really, really high picks. And I feel like the Rockets just kind of were like, our hands are tied. I mean, we're kind of screwed by keeping him. He doesn't want to be here. He's making everyone look bad, and everyone's getting upset with him. So I guess let's kind of get rid of him. Is that kind of what you get from that whole thing? Or do you feel like, I don't know, how do you feel like this trade went down? I mean, I saw some things on like Twitter and stuff where he just wanted out and was kind of, I wouldn't say throwing a fit, but he was just like, oh, I don't want to play if I'm still here. So what was your take from it, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think they had to move on, whether it was trading him to the Nets, or I know the 76ers were in talks with Houston, but like you said, he was on the podium and said basically that the situation isn't going to get any better, and I mean, he didn't say anything like demanding out, but he kind of just dragged them through the mud in the press. So had to move on from him somehow. And I mean, I honestly think the Rockets didn't do too bad for him. You got Caris LeVert, who I think they traded to Indiana not long after. And I mean, this is off the court, but I think when he got the physical with the Rockets, they found a mass on his kidney. So getting traded may have kind of saved, maybe not saved Caris LeVert's life, but helped him find a major medical issue. But I mean, Rockets got all these picks back, and they kind of had to stock up because when they traded for Russell Westbrook a couple years ago, they got rid of a lot of picks. So this kind of helps them stock back up. And I personally think that those pick swaps could be valuable going forward because I don't think there's a lot of middle ground with this trade and this Nuggets or this Nets team. I think they're either going to be really, really good and be championship quality, or it's going to crash and burn, because these are all guys who are kind of unique in the way they think, and I don't know if they think this way, but it kind of seems like offenses have to revolve around them. Like they're the sun and the offense has to revolve around them. And having three of those guys on the same team, I don't know if they'll be able to coexist for a long time. I mean, I know Kyrie, we're recording here on Wednesday the 20th, and I think tonight or tomorrow is the first day Kyrie's going to get to play with them. And Kyrie just kind of like alienates himself from his teammates a lot of the time, whether it was LeBron and Cleveland or Boston last year. And I mean, he does a lot of good things with like social justice movement, and I think I saw that he bought George Floyd's family a house, or somebody who's a victim of police violence, he bought them a house. So I think he's got his mind in the right place, but he just goes about life with an attitude that kind of alienates people. And I could see him either being traded or kind of blowing this thing up. And then I think James Harden and Kevin Durant, either though they're old friends from Oklahoma City, they could maybe butt heads just because of the offensive load they all want. So, I mean, if this thing blows up and Brooklyn sucks in 4 or 5 years, those pick swaps could be valuable. So I think the Rockets did probably about the best as they could. And they had to, like you said, have some other teams in there to kind of make things work. And Cleveland got Jarrett Allen, who's a good player, and some other picks kind of moved around there. But I think it's probably a win for both teams if I had to kind of put a bow on it.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the Rockets, you're getting 2021 picks for this year, and then they go all the way up to 2027. So you're getting picks for the next 6 or 7 years. And I be honest with you, Harden probably be retired the next 6 or 7 years. I mean, I could see him playing longer, but he's not going to play. He only has like 3 or 4 more years of James Harden type of play. Same thing with Durant. I mean, he only has 6 or 7 years more, or 4 or 5 more years of being Durant. So they're kind of covering their butt for the future as well, even past then, because even the Rockets wouldn't have been able to use Harden for another 2 or 3 years. And to be honest with you, I feel like the way James Harden carries himself, and you especially see it with this demanding of a trade, even though he didn't come out and say, I want out of here, I want traded. I don't think anybody really wanted to come to the Rockets and play with them. I don't think it was like it just didn't seem appetizing to anybody to go out and play with him. So I feel like he kind of burned bridges, and so to kind of send him to a different team, it kind of helped the Rockets out in the fact that, now they can bring some other people here maybe in free agency later that they just couldn't because, people didn't want to play with James Harden or whatever the issue is. And so the Nets right now are currently 9-6. I mean, obviously they're getting some more firepower. James Harden's going to be there, and as you said, Kyrie's coming back. I think it's tonight is their game. So they might be 10-6 or 9-7 at the point of you watching or listening to this. But what are your thoughts on this team, and do you think these trades make the Nets a title contender?
Yeah, I would say they're a title contender just because that top end of their roster is outstanding. I mean, I would say there's no other team in the league that can match them 1 through 3 at the top as far as talent. But I mean, this trade really took off a lot of their bench players. I mean, Jarrett Allen is a really solid center that the Cavs have now. Caris LeVert, before he got traded and then, found out he was facing some medical issues, he was a solid role player. So if one of these guys gets hurt or something, you don't really have a lot of backups there, a lot of key guys. They traded away a lot of that young core they'd spent years building up. So I think it definitely makes them a title contender, but if 1 or 2 things go wrong, that could really go off the rails quick. And Just another kind of comment on, I guess, them now and going into the future. This reminds me of, I don't remember how many years ago it was, when they traded for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce when they both left the Boston Celtics. And the Nets gave up all these picks. They basically mortgaged their future to get these couple guys, and that ended up kind of going down in flames. They had to rebuild. This kind of has the same feel to me of that if it doesn't result in a championship, their whole organization's basically going to have to start all over again in the next couple of years. So be interesting to see how it plays out. And, I mean, got a shortened season a little bit this year, but we'll have time to kind of gel together before the playoffs, and just be interesting to watch their journey throughout this season.
Yeah, and I mean, you think of it like, like you said, God forbid an injury happen, that would just completely ruin everything. I mean, if Kyrie, gets injured, or one of them gets injured, I mean, that completely changes the team from a title contender to barely making the playoffs. And so, I mean, they need to make those three guys work. And I feel like they took a big risk, but I also feel like, they thought maybe, hey, we're only going to have Durant for so long. Let's try to get something happening here. And that kind of seems to be what New York, New Jersey, LA teams, these high market teams seem to continue to load up on guys like this and continue to make super teams is what they call them in the NBA, I think. And I mean, it's the same. I mean, like we talked about the last podcast, the same thing with MLB, and the MLB right now is going through free agency, and you're seeing guys sign huge contracts to go to these big market teams. A few guys that are going to kind of smaller market teams are like George Springer. He just signed his contract, I think today or yesterday, with the Blue Jays for $150 million for 6 years. So a Blue Jays not really a team that is a high market team, but they do have a lot of salary cap because they've actually done a really good job of moving guys around and not paying for these huge guys. But then you look at your LA Dodgers, who can kind of just afford anybody, and you look at the Yankees, who just signed DJ LeMahieu to a $90 million 6-year deal there. What are your thoughts on, if we switch over to the MLB, what are your thoughts on some of the early signings and some of the notable names that have signed already?
Yeah, I mean, the Springer one stands out to me just because I don't like the Astros. I mean, the whole cheating scandal and everything, but I've always liked the way George Springer plays. And I don't know if he's going to a winning team, but it's kind of good to get away from the stink of the Astros and maybe get a start somewhere else and get your money there. So I don't know if the situation will be a ton better for him as far as kind of looking at a World Series run, but got some young guys there that could gel together in the next couple of years while he's there. I mean, he's tied down for, I think he said 6 years, so you can see them develop in his time there. Maybe not do anything now, though. I don't know. I defer to you on a lot of the MLB stuff. The thing that kind of sticks out to me is some of the names you're still hearing haven't been signed yet, and it seemed like it happened this way last year too, where if you didn't get signed early, you were waiting around till close to the beginning of the season to really get an offer if you're sticking to your guns on money. So, I mean, you still got guys like Trevor Bauer, JT Realmuto, Marcell Ozuna, Nelson Cruz. Some of those guys are all still waiting, and could be another situation like last year where if you're wanting big money and you don't get it right away, it's maybe 2 weeks before the season starts and you have to kind of panic and take a lesser deal to find a team. But what do you think about all these signings and maybe some signings to come with some of these big name guys?
Yeah, I think out of these guys, I think Trevor Bauer probably gets the biggest contract. I think he'll get a, and I don't know numbers, but I could see him getting like some sort of like Clayton Kershaw contract that locks him down for like 10 years or 12 years, even though he's not going to pitch that long. They'll try to, it'll be a big contract. It'll be bigger than $150 million for 6 years, like Springer got. Some other kind of names that have come off the board, Liam Hendricks goes to the White Sox for 3 years, $54 million. And the reason that's kind of a big deal is the White Sox are slowly building that team into a AL, I wouldn't say powerhouse, but the White Sox weren't bad last year, and all they're doing is adding more to it. They're Liam Hendricks, a proven closer that can close out games, and the White Sox kind of struggled in that last year. They didn't really have a closer that could close out games, so they're starting to kind of round into a team that might be coming out of the AL every year, and they got a ton of young guys that are really, really good. So I think the White Sox are kind of building that powerhouse in the AL. Obviously, they're not a huge market team. Even though being in Chicago, they're not a huge market team. They got to kind of fight with the Cubs there, which is America's team. So I don't know how the White Sox will be in 4 years. I mean, they got the talent, but I'm sure they won't be able to afford it all. Have to kind of move guys around. On the Royals note, they got Carlos Santana. He's going to the Royals for $17 million over 2 years. And then they just signed Wade back today, which is good to see as a Royals fan. But just some kind of noticed those names being signed. And as you said, still a ton of guys not being signed. Bauer, Real Muto, and Ozuna, I would say, are kind of the top 3 guys that people are going to want to get. There's a few other guys out there that, could easily help a team, but these are like the 3 big guys. Springer was one of those guys, and then LeMahieu is probably the other one. So those top 5, 2 of them already signed. I would expect Bauer. I don't know, because I haven't heard any rumblings at all about any teams offering him money or anything like that. But Bauer is just an arm that rarely comes up on free agents. Just rarely. I mean, he's just the fiery guy, and I'm just surprised that Cincinnati didn't bring him back. I'm surprised that they weren't able to do anything to bring him back, and I guess, see what free agents. I think he wanted way too much money. And honestly, I would say Bauer probably goes to the Yankees, because the Yankees seem to be about the only team that can afford all of these expensive guys. Real Muto, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I could see him going to like a Dodgers or a team like that that's kind of really like high caliber but still needs kind of a catcher. And then Ozuna's kind of just floated around, and he's kind of just held his own wherever he goes. He started out in Miami. That's kind of where I learned about him, was when he was with Miami, and then he was part of the trade that got him out of Miami, and then a free agent deal with the Cardinals, and then he's kind of just bounced around, and he's done his job. I mean, he did well when he was in Atlanta. Atlanta made the playoffs, and he was one of their kind of staple guys. So I would say Ozuna is probably the next guy that gets signed out of this group. Nelson Cruz probably only got a few years left before he's done. I see him signing with kind of like what he did before. He signed with Minnesota Twins. I could see a team like the Twins, or a team kind of at the 50-50 mark that needs a bat, and probably in the AL, so they can use him as a DH. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. There's still some really big names on the free agency list, and the MLB is about halfway through their mid-season, I guess. They get it a little longer than the NBA had. NBA only got a month or something, but hopefully I'll start warming up. I'm getting cold, so I want it to warm up. I want some baseball to come back around, but we got some exciting sports still coming. We got the Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks. Hopefully our Chiefs make it back, and then we'll kind of move on to most NBA content for a while until MLB comes back, and then we'll have MLS soccer and all that good stuff. But yeah, that's gonna be it for us. Mark, you want to hit us out?
Yep. Thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. We appreciate you guys, and we'll try to be coming at you on a regular basis. We're just both busy currently. Got 2 or 3 jobs each of us, so we'll try to come at you week to week. But we'll let you know when we're gonna publish things. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, whether you're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever app you use. Make sure you subscribe there. We also have a YouTube channel you can find by searching Slacker Sports Show. We publish the audio there if you're more of a YouTube person. And then we have a Twitter account that you can find by searching @Slacker Sports.